I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.
Hello there, Price of Reason here with a movie review. Over the past few years, there's been no shortage of poorly conceived, poorly written, and poorly made superhero movies. Whether it's movies based on Marvel or DC characters, if you're a fan of the comic book movie genre, chances are that you've noticed that Hollywood has pretty much turned this entire genre into one giant diminishing return. And if you were hoping that Sony's new Marvel movie, Madam Web, would somehow break that trend, I believe you're going to be greatly disappointed. Madam Web, for those who are unaware, is a side character within the Spider-Man comics, and much like with the movies Venom and Morbius, Madam Web is yet another attempt by Sony to capitalize on the Spider-Man universe, which it owns the rights to, but doesn't always know what to do with. In this video, I will go over the general, plot of Madam Web, what I didn't like about this movie, what I did like about this movie, followed by my official score. The movie starts off in a flashback scene that takes place in 1973, where a 9-month pregnant woman is hiking in the Amazon, searching for a magical spider that can cure hundreds of diseases. Once she finds the spider, her suspicious-looking bodyguard shoots her and takes it away from her. But then, a Peruvian Spider-Man that lives in the Amazon jungle takes the wounded woman to a secret pond where she's bitten by a completely different magical spider. This new spider's venom apparently saves her baby, but unfortunately for the pregnant woman, she herself dies during childbirth. Jump forward to New York City 2003 where this movie takes place, and that same baby is now Cassie Webb, an EMT that likes to help people, but then gets annoyed when they thank her for helping them. You see, growing up as an orphan has made Cassie a grumpy weirdo, so her only real friend in the world is Ben Parker, who is on one hand constantly being teased in this movie as Peter Parker's future uncle, but on the other hand obviously doesn't exist within the same universe as Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Anyhow, one day while saving a guy on a bridge during an emergency, Cassie falls into the East River and discovers that she has special clairvoyant powers. So moving forward, she keeps seeing future events before they actually happen. Meanwhile, the suspicious bodyguard that killed Cassie's mother in the jungle is now living in New York City too, and every night he has bad dreams that one day in the distant future, 3 spider ladies will kill him. So he tries to preempt this by finding them in the present and killing them first. In order to achieve this, he steals a password from a female NHS government employee after he sleeps with her and then kills her. He then apparently gives that password to a hacker lady to locate the spider ladies in present day, based on a vague description that he gives her of them. And it turns out that in present day, all 3 future spider ladies are actually little girls, but the hacker still somehow manages to locate them. Meanwhile, Cassie has visions that these same girls are going to die, so she finds them and stops the suspicious bodyguard, who is now also some type of evil Spider-Man, from killing them. In order to protect the girls, Cassie then steals a taxicab and leaves them in a forest by themselves as she goes home to read her mother's diary from the Amazon jungle or something. The girls get tired of waiting for Cassie to return, so they go to a local diner and start dancing on the table when they hear a Britney Spears song. Due to their dancing, the suspicious bodyguard evil Spider-Man shows up to kill them, so Cassie, who is now a fugitive, crashes into him with her stolen taxi and rescues them. At this point, Cassie decides to leave the 3 girls under the supervision of Ben Parker as she travels to the Peruvian forest where her mother was killed. While she's there, Cassie meets with a Peruvian Spider-Man who had saved her as a baby, and through some sort of spiritual experience, Cassie learns that her mom actually went to the jungle in 1973 to try and heal an unborn Cassie from a rare disease. So in fact, it's not that Cassie's mother was just selfish and dumb as we all had initially thought. Her mother was actually stunning and brave because she sacrificed herself in order to save Cassie. This revelation causes Cassie to go back to New York City so that she can confront the suspicious bodyguard. And since Peter Parker's mother has gone into labor with Peter, Ben Parker and the 3 little girls decide to take her to the hospital. Why are the girls going to the hospital when they're putting their lives and the Parkers' lives at risk for doing so? Yeah, don't think about it. Anyhow, after a final showdown, Cassie kills the suspicious bodyguard by dropping a giant Pepsi sign on him. But unfortunately, she also becomes blind and paralyzed in the process. The final scene of the movie is at Cassie's apartment where she's visited by the girls who will, presumably one day, all become Spider-Women, and that's where the movie ends. Let's start with what I didn't like about this movie. Too often these days we hear about how so many untalented writers in Hollywood keep failing upwards, and a prime example for this are writing duo Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, best known for writing stinkers like Morbius and 2017's Power Rangers, who along with the movie's director, S.J. Clarkson, are responsible for Madame Web's awful screenplay, if you could even call it that. Nothing that anybody does in this movie makes any logical sense, especially when it comes to character motivations or just general storytelling logic. I could probably dissect every single scene in this movie and question the writer's decision making, but since that would take too much time, I'll just focus on some of the bigger issues, such as, what are the ultimate goals of the suspicious bodyguard villain? Why did he want the spider to begin with? In what ways have the spider's powers really helped him? What does he do for a living? What are his ambitions? How is he able to use technology that doesn't even exist in 2024 to find the girls in 2003? And no, stealing a password from an NHS agent is not a sufficient enough explanation. Also, if Cassie is supposed to be a fugitive from the law, why does everybody keep forgetting this plot point throughout the movie, including when Cassie nonchalantly travels outside the country to a Peruvian jungle and then returns to the US with no questions asked? In addition, how does Cassie drive an ambulance out of the second story of a building and then keep driving it as though nothing has happened? And why would Ben take the girls outside of his house when his one task was just to make sure that they stayed in the house? Even if Parker had briefly left the girls there, the villain would have never located them. And what are the defined powers of Cassie? She seems to see the future, but that ability is presented in a very random, irritating, and inconsistent way. And why does the movie keep suggesting that the little girls will eventually become Spider-Women with no additional explanation? Finally, why are we told at one point that all the girls have some type of personal and spiritual connection with Cassie, but then that idea is never really explored or even mentioned again? And honestly, we're still just really scratching the surface here. This script not only has major plot holes at every corner, but its overall storytelling keeps falling apart as well. The entire plot of the movie is basically revealed within its first 10 minutes, and the movie's characters from that moment on only seem to be playing catch up with the audience, who is always a step ahead of them. None of the dialogue or interaction between characters seems at all believable, and at best they seem like NPCs in a video game interacting with each other. Not one friendship or relationship here seems authentic, because no effort has been made on a writing level to present it that way. You're never convinced that these girls are forming a real camaraderie, or that they're actually bonding with Cassie. And in too many instances, the script tells rather than shows, by transferring the information to the audience through clunky dialogue without any kind of nuance whatsoever, as if the movie doesn't respect the audience enough to figure out even the most basic concept or ideas by themselves. And too often, things just randomly happen in the movie because the screenplay needs them to, no matter how forced and contrived they feel. I guess what I'm saying here is that the movie's screenplay seems like a rough first draft written by a 5-year-old child, and I suspect that nobody over at Sony Studios has ever even bothered to proofread it. And it's not like the movie's quality here is boosted by any other aspects of its production. Even with a terrible screenplay, in some cases a director can at least try to bring some sense of style or atmosphere to a movie, where it would at least be aesthetically pleasing to watch, even if nonsensical, but director S.J. Clarkson can't even seem to do that either. And given Clarkson's poor writing and poor directing, one has to wonder why she was even hired for this job to begin with. After all, until landing this gig, Clarkson's main claim to fame was that she directed some episodic TV as a gun for hire under the supervision of more experienced creatives. And the only time that Clarkson had ever actually led a big project prior was a Game of Thrones spin-off pilot that she directed so poorly that it was then scrapped by HBO after they had already spent $30 million on it. And if it was anything like Madame Web, I can certainly understand why. If I had to point out Clarkson's biggest problem, it's that nobody working under her supervision seems to know what to do either, making this movie seem like a ship with no captain. The camera work is shaky and annoying, with a bunch of poorly placed zoom-ins that add nothing to the overall feel of the movie. The music and score usually seem out of place. The audio mixing is completely imbalanced to a point where you sometimes can't even hear the dialogue. The lighting is unacceptable. The editing is choppy and unprofessional, as if it was done by somebody who has never edited a movie before. However few CGI effects we see in this movie look cheap, like something from the CW's Batwoman, and I would say that the action scenes are poorly staged too, but there really isn't enough action for me to even dwell on that, which is just another strange aspect of the movie, considering its genre. Now, in some cases, I've seen very bad movies that were at least still somewhat elevated due to an actor's good performance, on-screen charisma, or general likability, but all of the actors in Madame Web seem either confused, disinterested in the material, or both. Especially lead actress Dakota Johnson, who seems surprised anytime we see her on screen, as if she can't believe she's in this movie. And while it's possible that it's not entirely Johnson's fault, it's also clear that she's simply not a good enough actress to rise above the material in any way. Maybe some women liked seeing Johnson in those stupid 50 50 Shades of Grey movies, but I just don't think she has enough range to do much else. It's been reported that because of this movie, Johnson has fired her agent, but I think it's still likely to negatively impact her career as a leading lady moving forward. Aside from that, the movie also misuses its supporting cast, who could have been utilized to at least give the movie a bit of character. For example, Adam Scott is usually good at playing more colorful and humorous characters, but in this movie, he's just drowsy and bland. Same with actor-comedian Mike Epps, who seems to have nothing more to do here than a very forgettable cameo. Sydney Sweeney in real life is an appealing 26-year-old woman, but in this movie, she plays a dumpy 16-year-old awkward and nerdy girl for some reason. Tahar Rahim, who plays the suspicious bodyguard villain, gives one of the worst acting performances that I've ever seen. In every scene that he's in, it looks like he's doing a Tommy Wiseau The Room impression, which means that instead of appearing as a menacing and threatening villain, he just comes off as unintentionally funny. I also think that they overdubbed all of his lines in post-production ADR, as they seem to be out of sync with his actual performance. As far as messaging goes, it's entirely possible that this movie wanted to show an evil male Spider-Man being bested by 3 little girls, but the movie is so bad that any messaging here becomes completely negligible. And at the end of the day, the big irony here is that a movie that was probably conceived as a beacon of female empowerment ends up being a female-centric disaster, led by a female cast and directed by a female director, one that will go down in history as one of the worst movies ever made, in any genre, since the invention of cinema. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that when it comes to major studio productions, with an $80 million budget, Madam Web is one of the worst movies that I've ever seen, and I've seen plenty of bad ones, especially in recent years. Now, when it comes to scoring, even when I don't like a movie, I always try to find at least something good about it, but honestly, I can't think of one positive thing to say about Madam Web. It's a rare movie that's so bad that I don't know if I can even call it a movie at all. The only positive feeling I had while watching it was when the end credits finally started rolling, so I suppose I can give the movie 1 point for that, which means that my score for this movie is 1 out of 100, and honestly, I think that even that is a bit too generous. But if you're new to my channel, please make sure to like, subscribe, and get notification. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.